Hello guys and welcome to Coding Orbit. In this video I will show you how to localize your app the best way and without weird syntax. Now once we click on the button it will change the language and it will change the direction of the app if it's right to left or left to right, and once we launch the application, if we have the language that the phone is using it will use it, otherwise it will use a default language that we set. Now if we go to the settings and change the app language and click continue, now after it reloaded, once we launch the application it will use the second language, it will not use English. So let's try it. Let's go back to the app and wait for it to load, and you can see that it uses Arabic by default and we can change it. Now before we get started, if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our content. Now let's dive in. Alright, now I have already created a Flutter application which has a column, a text here and a text here and a divided button here. Now once I click this button, nothing will happen. So let's get started. Alright, now the first thing I will do, I will create a new folder, a new directory, and I will call it lang. Now inside here we will use JSON, so I will create a file called in.json, which stands for English, and I will create another file called ar.json, and inside here I will paste the strings we will use. We will use hello as hello there, and I will use info as this text and change language. Now for AR I will do the same, so I will paste these values and I will close them. Now I will go to pubspec and I will add the reference for this lang, and after the assets I will uncomment this and make them add that, and I will change this to lang and with a splash. Now we will go back to the main and we will start implementing the localization. Alright, now I will create a new Dart file under the lib. I will call it localization service, and inside here I'll create a class called localization service. And now I will create late final local, and I will create the constructor which is localization service, and it takes this dot local. Now after it I will create a helper method, so static localization service, let's call it off, and it takes build context, and here we will return localizations dot off, and it takes build context and the type is localization service. Now we will do that because every time we call the localization to localize a string it would be a long line, so by doing that we will shorten this thing. Now after this we will load the JSON file, so I will create void or future void and let's call it load, and it doesn't take anything and it's async. So inside here I'll create final, I'll call it JSON string. We want to get AR or EN, so it's equal to await root bundle dot load string, and we have to specify the key, the string key, which is lang slash. Now we don't know what language to use, so we will use this local. We will use local dot language code dot after it JSON, and after that we will create a JSON map to hold this file. We will say map string dynamic, and let's call it JSON map. Now it's equal to JSON decode, and we will decode the JSON string. Now since this map has string dynamic, because all JSON have string dynamic, and we want it to be string, we will create inside here, we will create map string string, and let's call it localized string, and let's make this late so our constructor doesn't complain. Now inside here we will convert this map into this map. So what we will do, we will say JSON map dot map. Now this takes key and a value, and we will return map entry. The key is the key and the value dot to string, and we will say localize the string is equal to this. Now let me give you a little bit of space before we continue. Now after this function I will create another function, and it returns either a string or null, and we will call it translate, and this takes key, string key, and we will return the localized string for this key. Now after this I'll create another method, and it will be static const, and we will call it supported locals is equal to, we will create two locals. The first local is en, and we'll say this is US for country code, and another local, and we will say AR, and this time I will use AR. And now after these two I will create another function, and it returns local or null, and I will call it local resolution call back, and inside it takes local nullable, and we will call it local, and it also take iterable local, and this is also nullable, and I will call it supported local. And inside here we will first check if this supported local is different from null, and we will check if this local is different from null as well, and if it's not null we will return supported local dot first where element dot language code is equal to the local dot language code, and if it's not, or else, we will return supported locals dot first. Now if it's equal to null we will return null. So what does this method do? This method checks on the supported locals and checks on the local. For example, the phone language, like before when I showed you when we switch the phone language from English to Arabic, once we launch the app it chooses Arabic as our language, and that's what happens here. It checks if the local sent by the device, if we have it or not, and if we have it, it will return it. If we don't have it, we will just return the first one, which is English. So this is the default application language. Now let's continue. Now before we implement this function, let's go to pubspec.yaml, and after Cupertino icons, let's add this dependency, which is Flutter Localization and SDK Flutter. Now click pubget and wait for it to finish. Now once finished, go back to the localization service, and here we will create static const, and we will call it localization delegate, and it's equal to a list. Now this list, it has global material localizations dot delegate, and it has global widget localization delegate. And after this we will also have another delegate, and we will create it ourselves. Now why would we have a delegate ourselves? Because we want Flutter framework to call this function and to call this class and use it, not ourselves. So the global material localization is responsible for Flutter widgets, like an alert or something. It has OK or cancel, so it will translate those, and global widget localization is responsible for left to right and right to left widgets. Now let's continue. Now I will create a class, and this class is called localization service delegate, and it extends localizations delegate of type localization service. Now before we extend this method that or override them, let's create a const localization service delegate, and now let's override these three methods. Alright, now inside is supported, we want to check if this local is supported. So what we can do, we can bring a list, we can say return list of en and ar dot contains local dot language code. Now if you have another languages than these two, you can add them here, and inside here, this is the one that matters, the load. So inside here we will create a localization service, and we'll call it service is equal to localization service of this local. Then we can make this async actually. So inside here we would say await service dot load, and then we will return the service. Now this method, I actually don't know what it does. So we can return false, and if we return false, everything will be alright and everything will work as expected. Now let's create this delegate. So inside here, so we would say const localization delegate of type localization service, and we will call it delegate is equal to localization delegate. And let's add a static here. Alright, now that's it for this file. Now we will go to the main, and inside the material app we will create or we will define localization resolution callback, and we will say localization service dot localization resource callback. However, we wouldn't send anything inside here. Now we will also use supported locals, and we would say localization service dot supported locals, and we will use localization delegates. So we would say localization service dot localization delegates. Now to use this localization service, what we can do, we can come here, and instead of using this string, we can say localization service dot of context, the helper we created, dot translate, and we have to send a key here. So I will go to the lang, to the English, and I will copy this key, which is hello, and paste it here, and remove this const and force unwrap it. Now if we run the app, it will work. However, before we run it, since we have to provide this key, and sometimes you might just add a character and it wouldn't find it, and we are force unwrapping it, so I'm not sure if it will crash or it will just return nothing. So let's not do that, and let's take this tutorial to another level. Let's go to the lib and create a new Dart file and call it t_keys, and t stands for translation keys. Inside here I will create an enum, and I will call it t_keys, and the keys are actually the keys inside the JSON file. So I will copy this hello and paste it here, then I will copy the info and paste it here, and I will copy the change language and paste it here. Now whenever we create a new string, we would add it inside the t keys, and we will go to the JSON files and add it as well. Now what I will do here, I will add an extension, and I will call it t keys extension on the t keys. Now inside here I'll create a getter, it's a string, and I will call it string, and it will return this dot toString dot split, and we will split it on the dot, and we will take the first value. Now what we are actually doing, since once we come here we would have it, for example, t keys dot hello. So we want to split this, and we want to get the second part. It starts from index 0, so we want to get the first index, and let's have get here. Alright, now, and maybe remove this. Alright, now I will create another method here, and I will call it translate, and it will always return a string, and it takes context, and this time this string it returns the, and I will go to the main and I will copy this actually. So I will copy this and paste it here. Now instead of using this keyword, or this, instead of typing it ourselves, I will import localization service. I will pass the key, which is this string, otherwise we will return nothing, and that's it. Now instead of using the whole sentence, what we can do, we can actually say t keys dot hello dot translate and provide the context. Now if we run it, it will work fine. So let's run it. Let's open the simulator and let's run our app. Alright, now you can see that the first string hello is in Arabic because we are still in Arabic in the device, and the other text is in English because we didn't change it. Now if we change it, it will appear also in Arabic. So t keys dot change lang or info dot translate with the context, and remove the const from here, and same to here, t keys dot change language dot translate, and remove the const from here as well. Now if we save it, everything will be in Arabic, and if we go to the settings, and change the language, hopefully it will be in English. So let's try it. Alright, now let's open the application again and see if it will be in English or not, and it's in English. Now that's not everything. We still have to make this button work. When we click on change language, we want it to change the language from Arabic to English or English to Arabic. So let's implement it. Alright, to implement it, I will go to the browser, and we will use get for small state management. So I will copy this dependency, and I will go back to pubspec.yaml, and I will paste the dependency and click pubget and wait for it to finish. Alright, now after it finished, let's go back to the localization service, and I'll create a new class called localization controller, and it extends get x controller. Now I will create a string, and I will call it current language is equal to nothing dot obs, and dot toString. Alright, now I will create a void function. Let's call it toggle language, and it doesn't take anything. And inside here, before I continue, I will go to the localization service, and I will create another one of this. However, it's final, and I will call it current local. Alright, now after this, inside the constructor, I would say current local is equal to local, and down here I would say current language is equal to, and let's go back above. Sorry, I want it to be static. All right, now let's go back here, and I want to use localization service dot current local. Now if it's equal, sorry, dot language code, if it's equal to AR, we will change it to EN. Otherwise, if it's EN, we will change it to AR. And after that, we will call update function, and that's it for this controller. Now we will go back to the main, and inside the main, first, I will inject this localization service. So I will say final localization, or let's call it localization service is equal to get dot put and we want to put the dependency, which is localization controller. Now inside the material app, before we do anything, we will actually return get builder, and this builder, inside it we will have localization controller, and we will call it controller. Now we will make this get builder of type localization controller, and we will specify an init, which is the localization controller, or we call it service. Let's call it localization controller instead. Controller. All right, we will use this inside here, and I will cut this material and return it inside the builder. So we'll say return this material and have a semicolon here. Now this is not all, we still have to specify a local. Now what is the local? The local is controller dot current language is different from null, and controller dot current language is different from nothing. If this condition is satisfied, we will have local and controller dot current language, and nothing as country code. That's okay. Otherwise, let me give you a little bit of space. Right, otherwise we will return null, and we can actually remove this condition because we know it's not null, it's empty as first. And that's not all, we still have to come here and we have to say final localization controller, and since we injected above, we will not inject it again. We will say get.find and of type localization controller. Now remove this const and remove this const. Now let's go back to this button. Inside the elevated button, let's say localization controller dot toggle language. Now let's run the app and hopefully it will work. However, we are having an error, so let's check what is the error. Let's just remove this const and this const as well. Now let's run the app and hopefully it will work. Alright, the app is running, so let's click change language and we've got an error, so let's check it. Okay, this shouldn't be final, so let's rerun our app and see if this time it will work or not. Let's change the language and it works. So that was all. Thank you guys for watching, and if you like the video, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our content, and make sure to like the video and comment down below. I will see you in the next video.